Hey there, welcome to another episode of the Manufacturers Make Strides podcast. I'm your host, Martin Griffiths, and joining us today is Bhavik Shah. And Bhavik is an electric vehicle technology expert, and he's also the business growth manager at Unipart Automotive. So Bhavik has got over 3 decades of experience in automotive manufacturing, and then the last 10 years fully focused on vehicle electrification. So he's been at the forefront of this industry's shift towards more sustainable solutions. So, in our conversation today, we'll explore the future of vehicle electrification, dive into the strategies that foster innovation and growth, and uncover the realities of building a sustainable supply chain in this rapidly evolving sector. Bhavik is also going to share his unique insights from over the years of mentoring and leading within the electrified automotive manufacturing space. So stay tuned because we're going to get an insider's perspective on driving growth and innovation in the electrification of vehicles. Hey Bhavik, really good to have you on the podcast today. How are you doing?
Hi, Martin. Yeah, very good. It's a sunny day in Coventry. I'll say you picked a good week to have a chat with me.
So, we've got lots to dive into. You've obviously got a vast kind of expertise in automotive and electric vehicles. I would really like to start with the kind of knowing what got you into automotive sector in the first place. What kind of sparked that passion that you've obviously followed for a long time?
Sure. A chance and a unusual circumstance. So I graduated in aeronautical engineering at Imperial College in '94. The defense sector was on the downturn. We'd used up our military budgets. Most of the bigger European programs had gone south. So at the time, it was a chance to say, what do I do with this skill, which is highly mathematical, physics and engineering oriented? And I just had a fantastic opportunity as a grad to join a company called Ovarab. They were seeding new technology in computer-aided engineering, brand new at the time, very complex systems to be solved on a supercomputer. And I thought that's amazing. And they were looking for a team and a young talent pool to join them. And that brought me into mechanical engineering, vehicle simulation engineering. And actually, that's been going on for 30 years now in different ways.
Yeah. Well, how do you see, obviously, we're in a kind of a crux of a change at the moment from internal combustion engines to either electric vehicles or some kind of hybrid. How do you see this point? What's your kind of take on the landscape of where we're at the moment, and what do you think happens next?
Yeah, transport. Well, transport is massively changing, right? Everyone's talking about that in any casual conversation. Basically, 25% of global greenhouse gases, it comes from transport. It's really a major part of it. So every policy, everybody has been focused on transport. The other thing is actually it's very solvable in transport compared to other sectors like agriculture or industrial waste or something like that. So it became quite quick that all climate change related activities. So we got the committee in the UK, Climate CCC, the Committee for Climate Change. They publish a report, independent one, into government, and quite quickly they'll say transport's the one to go for. Grand.
Mm-hmm.
When we go to the automotive manufacturers, they're used to designing cars to meet requirements. And actually, electric vehicles is not brand new. It's new to make it mass produced, but it's not brand new. And they could think of solutions. So what was great was there was a problem on the planet. The government understood it, and industry was willing to go for it. So electrification is what I call a near-term win, but it's still 25% of the problem. But globally, Martin, we still have many a gap even in transport. So the global leaders are China, Europe, and US. 95% of electric vehicle, if you like, sales, forget the production aspect of it, is within these major continental areas. So, well, there's more still yet to come.
Looking at the manufacturing businesses leading into that supply chain, what do you think are some of the critical factors that companies need to consider when making that transition themselves into electrification of vehicles?
Yeah, it's actually quite a topical area because it's one of those very complex dilemmas going on at the moment. So if you want to go into electrification, it's a whole platform change. When you change platforms, the amount of investment is large, but that's not the only problem because the supply chain that you're used to servicing your vehicle is also having to invent itself and change itself. So there's CapEx and OpEx on both the assembly side, the supply chain side, and then there's a global sectorial aspect because of the electronics content that goes within it. So you've seen those supply chain issues that we've faced for many years in terms of shortages as well. When you think about this as a business, actually you've got a real big problem of CapEx and OpEx and a supply chain. Then you've got the other problem is technology continues to change. It's a rapidly changing. It's not like a very stable car and we'll make a 1 liter engine, we'll make a 1.5 and we'll make a 1.9. No, it's no longer that way. You're even changing the format of a cell, a battery cell. You're changing the chemistry behind it. You're changing its size and its shape and the way it's packaged. So it's quite hard. And actually, it's quite hard to make money when it's not ready for mass market. So it's a very tough area. Everyone is at a bit of a struggle. Adoption is obviously not guaranteed as well. With the car market, we had to have a car to move, where we have a choice of an electric car versus a petrol and a plug-in. People may not necessarily support all of the predicted forecast models that are out there. The thing that's more fascinating for me, by the way, Martin, is the link to the energy system. So when you talked about what's happening with this space and how companies are transitioning, you've got the technical change to manage. You've got the supply chain that is immature. But the third element is the connection with energy. So what companies are having to think through is how do we connect our product with energy and look at it as an ecosystem so that we can now go for the critical factors for success more strongly. So it's no longer product only, but energy connection. And that's why you see Tesla into a charging market solution as well as a vehicle. You'll see VW and LE, energy provision, green electricity, driving a green car becomes a proposition.
So are you coming up with that from the point of view that you need to have the kind of the whole experience covered for the consumer to make sure that they've got because the consumer isn't just buying a car, they're buying a method of transport from A to B and they need to make sure they've got an easy way of keeping that charged? Or are you also thinking about, because I have some friends who are maybe on the more like petrol head side of the thing, and some of them are saying that, well, we're not going to jump to electric cars yet. It sounds great, the sustainability side of it, but if the energy is coming from a non-sustainable source, you haven't really got a sustainable solution. My kind of view on that is, yeah, but you can do one thing at a time, get the kind of car sustainable first, and then maybe you can change the energy source later. What's your view on that?
I love that topic. That's the one to go into the pub and have a really good conversation on. Actually, that's the right view. So there was two parts to, I think, if I understood that question. One is more a case of, does the manufacturer or the production systems look at the full needs of the consumer? It's yes and no. They've got to do that. But remember, there's been this fuel that's been available for 100 years that sits on a huge, massive infrastructure of grid called a petrol station, a refueling station. We could create a consumer-led product, we understand the consumer's needs, we understand what the persona of the consumers were, even if they were preferring an off-road vehicle or something to do with agricultural vehicle. We've been used to, in the automotive industry, understanding our consumer. What we've not been used to is such variability of demand signals. And then a fuel, we have to also figure out how the infrastructure for refueling has to work. That's the game changer, right? So Tesla has to fit superchargers across from LA to New York to make their product work. That wasn't the consumer telling them that. They had to invent something that the consumer might feel more comfortable with when purchasing a Tesla. So that's the thing. But your point about the energy mix is massively powerful. Why? If I'm going down an electric vehicle, you're right. Our first adopters were all about, well, showing off new tech. After they've got over that, it's a sustainability journey. It was a great bragging right to say, I travel on a zero emission vehicle. But if you put for fuel in there, electricity, which has also been coal-fired, like for example in China, which doesn't have the right infrastructure for green yet, that still isn't a green solution. And then you look at battery production, how much energy and materials go into that. So now the industry is very good at creating something called an LCA calculation, a life cycle analysis, and we can compare that. We compare the energy use, as you say, not just the vehicle, and we also come to raw materials. And that is the holy grail, is to get the LCA absolutely minimized across the supply chain for the product.
That's some good challenges you've got there. You mentioned a couple of challenges. That the vision is clear for the industry. We've got these kind of set in stone goals to get to fully sustainable zero emissions, but there's this very changeable landscape of tech and demands. How do businesses navigate? What's your advice on how businesses should navigate that and
Yeah,
bring the team along the way? Because you've got to make decisions and you've got to give people guidelines within that. It can't just be chaos on the way. So how's that best handled, do you think?
that's absolutely. Chaos doesn't handle chaos. Chaos is not great under growth. Chaos is great for innovation and small scale growth. So you're quite right. Firstly, we spoke about the lens of the companies who have to think about building manufacturing and production supply chains which are nimble and agile. So what that means is be ready that technology keeps on changing. So how do I build my setup like that? That was one crucial point. We spoke about the energy and product connection. Well, those who can crack that get access to currency. And the point is that the money may not be coming from the hardware on its own. It's coming from the energy aspect or from the data that's running it. Data is a massive it's a massive aspect of now new automotive. It's a fundamental aspect. And then the energy is also quite important. One of the things I'd say, Martin, the third ingredient is this collaboration point. Is it needs to be to solve these things needs a large amount of money. That's fine. Collaboration can bring a de-risking element of a shared investment. But actually, what I find quite useful is supply chain innovation is always a collaborative topic to go through. It's still not an industry where vertical integration is always the best way yet, and that will happen as maturity grows through. So what we can see is pockets of excellence that just need to come together. Now, how do we make that matchmaking work is probably one of those topics I think about quite a lot. Do I know all the right players, and are all the other players talking to the others so that the rest of the ecosystem develops? So I spent quite a bit of time in a government role at the Advanced Propulsion Center with these what we call very large collaboration projects, and I think that's a fantastic example of a program that works well for the UK. Without the APC, I think we would not be as far ahead on automotive innovation and industrialization as we would, especially for what I call the value of death problem. The innovation and academic research can happen in the early stages. That gets to a pilot stage quite well. Where things fall down is when they're trying to get to scale up in industrialization, where a lot of risk and capex is involved, and we call that the TRL, technology readiness level 4 to 7, value of death. Once you get over that, the productionization, commercialization is what a business normally wants to do. So yeah, collaboration through grant funding is the other magic bullet.
And do you think that's because that can bring in the skills or the expertise that may be missing from a more traditional automotive company, like the data analytics you mentioned before, or some other kind of skills?
Yeah, so it could be maybe it'll be a data-led solution. One might be an energy collaboration. So who do I connect with on energy? How about charging infrastructure? If I worked with another charging infrastructure company, not have my own charger, for example, what's that like? What about the battery supply chain? How about if I collaborate with one of the largest battery producers rather than try to build my own gigafactory first? What does that look like? There's things around the skills then you brought out is I don't have enough electronic and electrical people in my company, but by collaborating with the right one that's done this for 30, 40, 50 years who don't understand automotive, that could be a solution where I can grow rapidly. And it's that creativity on a leadership perspective that ends up making breakthroughs. Actually, you'll find a lot of companies like Ford already take a stake in other companies on that collaboration journey for battery technology. You'll find software. VW have invested in a large share, I think a few thousands of people in a cloud-based solution that VW now invest in just to create a data solution. So it's a great model for innovation and de-risking.
Brilliant. That's great. It seems like there's lots of kind of opportunities for this, but what excites you most about leading the growth in EV supply chains?
The space is remarkable. I mean, I'm in a place where electrification is absolutely game changing. So there's no shortage of challenging problems to solve. And that's where I thrive the most. What it has done, it changes everything from what is the powertrain on a vehicle. It's changed, as I said, the refueling approach towards it. You can think that way. Even what I like is integrating the use of energy now becomes the hot topic. So my vehicle has some charge on it. My house needs powering overnight. How do I make V2G, vehicle to grid work, vehicle to house work, for example? And how does that integrate? So innovation is now massive. But again, everything comes with money to be plowed in, and it's important that stuff starts to get commercialized. That's where I like my background, where I like to make products successful. I like to create revenue growth. And so it's hard to pick winners and then also to make these products and services commercializable and ready. That's where I spend my time, in those kind of spaces, to make sure I get the tech, I get commercial principles and new market propositions. I spend time with SMEs, I spend time with medium organizations and with large organizations. For example, I work at Unipart right now, growing the business for electrified supply chains.
One of the things you've mentioned a few times, that some of the challenges are quite large and some of the challenges need lots of kind of investment. Do you think there's a space for smaller companies within this to come into the EV supply chain and SME type organizations? Where do they fit into the picture, do you think?
Totally. Over the last 10 years at least, I have seen far more exciting work at SMEs that have added value to the larger corporations than ever before. A lot of these seed ideas they are more nimble, they're more agile, they've got loads of energy. The larger companies can't move at that level of pace and skill unless they create little mini incubators, which are also what I call SME culture. For me, SME culture, SME style thinking is absolutely crucial for innovation. We have had to move at a pace. I was just sharing that with you earlier, far more rapidly to get this electrification journey moving faster. And because it's a highly competitive environment, higher amount of competition, it correlates to innovation automatically. Innovation is strongest with SMEs. Now, where SMEs would struggle is at the scale up aspect or the funding aspects of it. Well, then I think the marriage between their conversation and a larger corporation or investor works really well. And therefore, the collaboration that we spoke about earlier becomes the glue that knits it together. The SME then has a journey plan, could be grow themselves, and they are then going to become a larger company. That's one model.
Yeah.
Another model is they are comfortable with what they do as innovation, want to stay in that small area, but happy for the IP to be worked across to another company. The other one is they might not know which way to chart a path, or how they want to go by it. And venture capitalists allow that journey to be organized or orchestrated for them. So there's many routes forward. But what you'll find with the SME journeys, when I spend time with them, there are obviously difficulties in them getting through all of these routes. They get quite caught up with not knowing how to access this kind of journey. So yeah, there's a bit more work in that space that I spend doing to help these companies grow in the UK.
So what would your advice to be for a company who's looking to kind of scale up their technologies or services with a focus on the EV supply chain? How would you be thinking about that?
So SME's biggest challenge, as I see it, and again, I think this is absolutely crucial. We have to just keep that support structure for that working correctly, is understanding a route to market. They often think, I've got a great idea, it's going to be easy, I just need some money and I'll unlock it. That's the normal modality. But what they don't realize is the automotive sector, in particular, the energy sector, have different type of complications and competition within themselves. The route to market is a key aspect of it, and scale up is the second biggest problem. How do I plan for scale up? Because they'll think innovatively, they'll have a pilot level build, but actually making hundreds of thousands is a very different topic, and they don't get that. Some of the programs that I think which are fantastic, Martin, I'll give you the example. It's a program called TDAP in the UK. That's Technology Developer Accelerator Program. It's also run by the APC, Advanced Propulsion Center, but a very separate part of it. They deliberately only work with SMEs at a small level of grant funding. But what I think they do, it's not the money, it's the mentoring aspect, the IP inventory, the business case, the business canvas, and then matchmaking to other organizations to allow that route to market, and even inform them about productionizing and scaling up. What does that look like? They go on to being very successful through this because of this intervention program, and they can take themselves to the valley of death, TRL 4 to 7 topic that we spoke about much more robustly. I think there is help, is my point. If SMEs need it, they should reach out to these programs. They're a great way to do this. And there are others. If you're in a battery space, there's a special one with a Faraday company. If you're into just motors, there's one with the DER, driving the electric revolution. There's many signposts we can give, as well as even Warwick Manufacturing Group has its own SME Growth Advisory Center. So if anybody needs any of that guidance, of course, I'm here to support that, or they can look that up.
That sounds great. That sounds really helpful. Like you were saying before, the big markets for EVs are, China, the US. What do you think UK companies are, more on the manufacturing side in this kind of race to be in that market? How do you
Yeah.
think UK companies are performing?
And it is a proper race. You are absolutely right. And I'm feeling we're being left a little bit behind, Martin, at this moment, to be very candid with you. So China caught on to this very early. It's built its infrastructure around it. It built a national program around it, and they've made a coordinated, very clever, large-scale coordinated program around it, right? So the way US answer to that is we'll put the incentivization, the biggest incentivization program ever on the planet, which is the Inflation Reduction Act, and that has helped. But money, as I was just mentioning, money is not always everything. They need a coordinated effort to go with it, I think, is where the gaps are starting to show up again. Europe thought, yeah, regulation will drive innovation and we'll get regulation right, which is great. And I love it, based on sustainability principles, a very ethics-oriented approach in Europe, and also a supply chain, if you like, taxing carbon is a principle from Europe that's fantastically leading a way of thinking and working. So now you've got Europe working that way, UK, which is with post-Brexit on its own, doing its own thing, first in the world to announce its decarbonisation. We call it a ban, and of course that's an awkward word, but effectively if we're incentivizing ZEVs, zero-emission vehicles, that's the UK's very key aspect. Now, we at our peak made 2 million vehicles in the UK. That's what I care about, is that we have a production economy, there is a supply chain economy, there's jobs around it, and actually there's a lot of prosperity in cities and towns. That is changing, and I think electrification, supply chains, Martin, is where my current focus is. I think we are weaker. We are relying on a lot more import aspect of it, whether it be Europe, Asia, or China. I'll just use mainland Europe as another area of non-UK economic activity. So effectively, I want to build that as big as we can. What I'm doing projects with is taking the strategy that I've done with the Advanced Propulsion Center, and we're saying, how do we get manufacturing working, growing for products that we can be competitive in? Now, we shouldn't be blindsided that labor costs and the way raw materials work are different, and therefore the innovation on what types of products. So I'd look for the high performance aspect. I'd look for some novel technology. I'll look at how manufacturing intelligence is more important systems wise than a labor model, for example, or a customer integration is more important in an ecosystem than a product specified and 3 months later you have something delivered without a proper conversation. Our situation right now is, I think, manufacturing protection is worked well. The government is making sure companies like JLR keep investing, which you've seen, BMW keep investing. Nissan have got a fantastic program for us as well. Toyota and Stellantis are looking strong. Those are our 5 major OEMs. We've got motorsport companies, we've got high performance companies like Aston and McLaren to look after. But what I'm sharing is, in the next 5 to 10 years, the proof will be the supply chain builds up to support these large companies. And if we don't get that right, then of course the large companies are unable to validate their process here.
So it's a key kind of 5 years to decades coming up.
If that sounds a little scary, it just is the reality of the message right now.
Yeah. I just want to dig into one thing that you mentioned earlier. It's a slight sidetrack, maybe. You mentioned that one of the programs that had kind of a good mentoring program involved in it. I just wondered personally, have any mentors particularly impacted you in your career? And do you think mentoring's an important thing?
I hope so. I've benefited from it, and I have helped others who call me a mentor. I don't like to use a label, but if I can be of help, is the way I've said it, then it's a mentor. So I've had loads of informal mentors, and actually industry is a mentor for me as a metaphor as well.
So like official mentoring comes with potentially a whole load of baggage.
Exactly. Coach mentoring are really not a UK phrase, as you might be aware. So early stage career, technically phenomenal mentor. I'll name him Richard Sturt. He's a director at Arup, a genius of a guy who taught me a lot about technical thoroughness, the breakthrough, groundbreaking work that we do with finite element analysis, for example, all the way to business mentors in the US with venture capitalists, and Tom Gottwald with some of the work we used to do on how to make a business succeed in the US. Come to the UK when I was at Jaguar Land Rover, lots of mentors there. about how to make an independent Jaguar Land Rover succeed, as the exit from PAG Group happened at one point with Tata. So it's nice. And then I walk into electrification and I've had to learn. So actually, I'll stop throwing all the names because there's far too many people to mention and be grateful for. And the point is, every innovation journey you will have gained from somebody, and that's for me a gratitude message to all of them. Where I play a role is business mentoring, creativity, growth, and an environmental factor. So how do we create a culture around growth is what I care about in my mature age. And that is one area where it gets overlooked if we're just after the understanding of P&L's configuration, that innovation is more than skin deep.
Yeah. There was something else that I did a little bit of research. I noticed that you'd had some time with mindfulness practices. I'd just be really interested to understand what that involved, what benefits you see that kind of bring to your personal life and your work life, and maybe to tag one question on the end, do you have like a daily ritual or a daily practice with that at the moment?
It's one of those most awkward topics in engineering, Martin, and especially within the male-dominant environment to talk
Yeah.
about this. And
Yeah.
it's nothing to do with sitting on a yoga mat, by the way. I'll just plan to start that way around.
I'll just slightly interrupt you there. Yeah, I totally agree about the awkwardness. I was asked about this on a flight with a colleague about 20 years ago. He asked me if I meditated or read philosophy. And I think the culture at the time was just that, engineers, we don't do kind of woo-woo stuff. We're just, hard facts. And it was very kind of, oh no, I definitely don't do that. And I think it was out of embarrassment. I think things have moved on now because it's, much more popular across the board. But yeah, there is. I've definitely experienced some of
I'm
that
glad
sort
you
of
said that.
attitude.
Yeah. So it's just for anybody listening, it was good to just make sure you and I spoke about that that way. Now, how it landed to me was the first point. It landed through personal adversity. Our son was born very unwell. He's now very healthy,
Okay.
turning
Okay.
18.
Oh, good.
And that led to quite a difficult personal situation at home where all the things you do as an engineer, know how to fix things, you know how to understand a problem.
Yeah.
When it's unsolvable and the medical
Yeah.
profession can't solve something, you've got to
Yeah.
dig deeper and much more
Sure.
wider. And that's where you get to know the human condition or human. And the capacity within the human then became more than just cerebral. That became a discovery. And that discovery led to more of an understanding of self. That's the whole story about where this goes. And I think that applies to anything. It's not about a meditation aspect or mindfulness aspect. It's actually that self-understanding that we as humans are more capable than we think we are.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that landed more strongly when COVID came and I was getting lots of questions around this. So I was then taking my personal journey and saying, right, so actually this unfed industry, the engineering automotive sector that doesn't want to talk about it, I can stand up as the director I was a director at the operations that I was at. And I said, that's okay, nothing embarrassing for me. It works and I can enact this program. So at lunchtimes, the team were doing mindfulness with me just to see how this goes. Now, what happens with that is behaviors in the meetings got better. The creativity starts to increase. They come in with a much more positive outlook on how they want to operate. And I got creativity coming out of those little principles. So benchmarked it, did a scoring system, and it actually worked really well. So what I think we've kind of forgotten some of those COVID-led lessons, which is well-being is important. And where I can, I try to still support people in their different journeys. I tackled adversity questions with this toolkit, and I also handle the creativity questions with this toolkit and make sure the culture and the environment is a healthy one.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, okay. Oh, that's fascinating. That's really interesting. I completely agree with that. And I think sometimes you can grind it out and just go through the work. But sometimes if you take those 5 minutes, 10 minutes at the start and change the mindset first, the subsequent work afterwards can flow much easier. I think it can have massive benefits.
That's very good.
Well, that's good.
I
That's good.
did remember that you asked another question within there, which is to do with the daily routine. I think I've seen this happen with now very senior leaders, C-suite people. I've seen it being used in the US, in the UK, and some of them not even sharing that they have. So there's some big names, including Lloyd's Bank directors and finance bankers as well, do this. Starting the day, the ritualization is different. It's getting that time to do a practice, and the practice is the self-reflection practice. Whatever you choose to do has helped many a CEO navigate. So if you're trying to go through adversity or difficulty, these tools are hugely powerful. And what that is without the phone, the space and time in the morning spent in whatever state you can to understand the thoughts and to understand that the processes going through allow you to have the right amount of abundant energy to solve things. That's step one. End of the day, it's quite handy, very helpful to do a declutter. And that could last 3 minutes to 5 minutes just to say, actually, that was a good day. That was a rubbish day. Oh, I've got all this stuff that I'm taking into a nighttime sleep pattern, and that's actually a subconscious problem where you don't process, and then you end up feeling tired the next day. So declutter at night, start off with a fresh understanding of how your energy is, and I think you will be a super successful superhuman.
Yeah, those are some big promises. By the declutter, do you mean a declutter of kind of up here, and
Yeah,
by like writing that down or journaling that somehow?
yeah, a declutter of the mind. You're quite right. So some people would be able to process and watch those thoughts escape. Some people write it down. Some people process it during the thinking process. It's
Yeah,
everyone's different.
sure. Got you. Got you. Great. Really good advice. That's perfect. Thank you. Really appreciate your time today. That was kind of fascinating. Have you got any kind of final thoughts or last things you'd like to mention? Where can people find out a little bit more about you, Bhavik?
Yeah, easy to reach me on LinkedIn, and then we can take it from there. So look at my profile, usually around growth. Business growth is my topic. Growth is not just about, yeah, as I said, it brings up all culture, people, tools, and innovation and technologies. I think this is a great platform, Martin, to talk about these topics. I've been in industry for this long, but there's no just a conversational topic, a pub chat that we can have like this, as I call it. Apologies if you're going to rename your
Yes.
podcast "Manufacturing Pub Chat," but it's quite healthy because we can get stuck in our technology, our particular products, but stepping out and seeing what makes us tick and work is quite helpful. So I do appreciate that you've set up this
Excellent.
platform.
Oh, it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. Thanks very much. Okay, great. Well, great to speak to you, Bhavik.
Okay, cheers.
So, thanks for tuning in to today's episode of the Manufacturers Make Strides podcast. A big thank you goes out to Bhavik Shah for sharing his expert insights and his experiences with us. I thought that was really interesting. So, if you enjoyed our discussion, please like and share this episode to help us get out there in front of other people like you. And also, don't forget to subscribe on YouTube or follow us on LinkedIn so that you can be sure of catching all of our latest episodes. And then join us next time as we continue to delve into the innovations that are shaping the manufacturing world. I'm Martin Griffiths, thanks for listening, and see you in the next episode.